All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we've got a really fascinating story for you. We're going to answer a simple question. How does a local chamber of commerce from South Carolina find itself right in the middle of a huge U.S. Supreme Court battle? It's all about strategy, influence, and one very surprising invitation.
So let's just dive right in. What we're unpacking today is basically a masterclass in how a seemingly small group can get a really powerful voice on the biggest stage. And it all started with a single, high-stakes invitation.
So, our story kicks off with a player you probably wouldn't expect to see stepping into the ring at the nation's highest court, the South Carolina African American Chamber of Commerce, or SCAACC. And they received a proposal that was, pretty unusual.
And we're not talking about some small-time local dispute. No way. This was a legal heavyweight. It involved a former president, it involved massive international trade deals, and really the future of American industry. This was truly an invitation to the big leagues.
Okay, so what was this legal battle actually about? Well, at the very heart of it all was a set of really controversial trade policies.
The case itself is a challenge to the legality of tariffs, and these tariffs were specifically designed to fight back against what the administration at the time was calling predatory Chinese EV and battery imports. So right off the bat, this is a major economic showdown.
Now, these weren't your average run-of-the-mill tariffs. They were put in place using something called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA for short. And that's a big deal, because that act gives the executive branch special powers in a crisis. Using it this way raised some pretty profound legal questions for the Supreme Court.
And what this all boils down to are some massive questions for the court. We're talking about the fundamental balance of power. How far can a president go in the name of national security? And did Congress give away too much of its own power to regulate trade? It's a real test of our government's core structure.
Okay, and this right here, this is where it gets really interesting. Why on earth would a state-level chamber of commerce get involved in this huge national showdown? I mean, what's in it for them?
For SCAACC, this was a golden opportunity. Think about it. This was a chance to argue that these tariffs weren't just some abstract national policy. For them, these tariffs were a necessary shield to protect their local, minority-owned businesses from what they saw as predatory, unfair foreign competition.
And this quote, this is where you can really see the genius of their strategy. They took this massive global trade fight and they reframed it. They said, hey, this isn't about geopolitics. This is about the survival of small, minority-owned businesses right here in South Carolina. It's brilliant.
But to make an argument that powerful, SCAACC knew they couldn't just walk into the Supreme Court by themselves. Nope. To really make their voice heard, they needed a strategic partner.
And the main tool they were going to use is something called an Amicus brief, which is just a fancy Latin way of saying friend of the court. Seriously, that's what it means. The best way to think about it is like an expert witness who submits a written report to help the judges understand the real-world impact of their decision. So their partnership had this really smart division of labor. You had SCAACC providing the official voice and the real-world standing as the friend of the court. And then working behind the scenes, you had a firm called Redwind Marketing doing all the heavy lifting, all the legal research and policy analysis that would give the brief its power. Okay, but here's the catch. This whole opportunity came with a ton of pressure. I mean, we're talking about the Supreme Court here, and they run on a notoriously tight schedule. They do not wait around.
Just look at this timeline. The opening briefs were due September 19th, but the really influential ones, the ones that get read first, were due just 4 days later. The entire thing, from start to finish, was an absolute sprint that would unfold in just a couple of months.
In fact, when you really boil it down, they had basically a one-day window on September 23rd to file that early brief and make the biggest splash possible. There are no extensions here. This just shows you the absolute immediate commitment that was required. The pressure was on.
So to hit that insane deadline, they needed a crystal clear game plan. They had to move fast through 5 key steps. First, get the formal board approval. Then designate someone to actually sign it. Then coordinate with Redwind on the draft, review all the legal arguments, and finally, hit submit before time ran out.
And it all came down to this resolution. This one sentence was the official green light. By approving this, SCAACC wasn't just talking about taking a stand anymore. They were officially kicking off the process to put their voice on the record before the highest court in the land.
So in the end, SCAACC's journey into the Supreme Court is just as powerful case study in how modern advocacy works. It shows how a local group, with the right strategy and the right partners, can absolutely command a national stage. And it leaves us with a final question to think about. When your community's interests are on the line, how do you make sure your voice gets heard?